Hi everyone, we are here today, as I'm sure many of you have seen, with the really lovely, my friend Wendy Dunn, and some of you will
Lovely to
know
see you.
her from her books. So thank you so much, Wendy, for taking the time out to come here today, because it's much later where you are than it is where I am. So
Almost in the time.
yeah, I was going to say, by the time you come off this, you're going to be like, I really need to go to bed now. So thank you so much. How have you been recently with everything?
Oh, it's so lovely to see you. It's been almost a year since we last saw each other.
Yeah,
Oh, goodness. What a different world it was then.
I know. So this time last year, we were at Sudeley Castle, almost to
Yes,
the day, wasn't it? And they'd been doing the excavations there as
yes,
well. And that year's flown by, hasn't it?
yes, and it was a
Absolutely.
beautiful day. It's a glorious memory. And I remember when we got somehow everyone disappeared on us. It was like we were,
We got
read
half
back.
lost, didn't we? We were like, yeah,
Lost in time.
we've all abandoned. Oh, because you said we slip, is this like some sort of time slip, and everyone's just literally vanished on us. It's very beautiful there, isn't it?
Oh,
I
it's
would love
wonderful.
to go
Yes.
back there again
Yeah. Well,
time.
one thing I have discovered about all my trips overseas is I always try and plan too much in every day because I just want to do so much. That was a day when I should have just stayed at the castle, even though we had that lovely experience of going to the next stop, which was, I don't regret that at all going to there, but I would have loved to have spent more time with you at the castle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was really lovely, and actually it was a little bit chilly on and off, but I was with my friend Vicky and we stayed like till basically till it shut, and we just had a really nice time. We wandered around a bit more and we went back to
Mhm.
the chapel, and we met Kirsty there, didn't we? And she was lovely, and we just sat in the sunshine eating ice cream, waiting for the peacocks to attack us. So if anyone hasn't been to Sudley and you get the chance, I really would, because it's absolutely beautiful, isn't it?
Oh, it's
Really well kept, and the
yeah,
chapel and everything where Catherine Parr is now interred was just an amazing experience,
yes. And
really.
have you been keeping tabs on the dig? Has there been anything?
I don't think so, because there was a thing called dignation. So some of you might have heard about this, and you can look it up. And there was supposed to be another one probably roundabout now again, and there was loads of people going down there, like people doing talks and other places that are having excavations, and you could come and take part. So for those of you who don't know, you can pay like a donation, can't you, to take part, and all this type of stuff. But obviously I'm guessing it's all been called off, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah, yeah, of
So
course.
and obviously with excavations you can only do them at certain times of year.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing that's probably going to have to wait another year, maybe. I'll
Oh,
see
well.
what I can. I'll speak to Kirsty and I'll see what I can find out. But
Yeah,
but
interesting.
yeah. So tell us all a little bit about you before we get onto your books and your tutoring. Just a little bit about yourself.
Like what, Catherine?
Well, I think we can probably guess roughly where you are in the world.
In Australia, I'm
What gives
Australian.
it away? um,
It's really hard to have this Tudor passion of mine because, of course, when you're passionate about the Tudors, you want to be able to see the places that they lived and loved and had their lives. And it's a long way for me to go
It's a
from Australia
really,
to England.
really long way, isn't it? So, but
So
you're a tutor, aren't you, for like
yes,
local colleges and
yes,
universities?
I've had a career as a teacher. So my teaching career started as a primary teacher, which I believe you call, is it elementary? No, is it American?
Oh, no, we say primary. So we have like preschool and early foundation and then primary. Yeah. So I think
Yeah,
elementary is in America, isn't it? But yeah,
yeah,
the cute
yeah.
ones, cute ones.
So I graduated from primary teaching to tertiary teaching, which is really weird. But anyway, that's so I retired from primary teaching in 2015 to just continue working as a tutor of writing at Swinburne University. So I've been very fortunate there. Yes, I did my doctorate in 2014 at Swinburne as well. I've always been, I've been passionate about the Tudors since I was 10 years old. I was given a child's book of English history. So I was always passionate about history when I was a child. And one of my friends gave me a book about English history, and there was a chapter in that book about Elizabeth I. And as she was known to do in her own age, she hooked me line and sinker, and her story led me to Anne Boleyn's story. And I often feel that my whole life is leading me to that time when I feel ready to write my Elizabeth I novel. But there's been so many different versions of her stories told by different writers. It's trying to find the right angle for that story. So it will get there one day, at least I hope so. Yes. So my first novel was, I've got them here actually.
Yeah.
This is the first one. So this is Dear Heart, How Like You This? And that was actually, oh my gosh, that was published 2002 for the first publisher. And then it was published again by another publisher in 2017. But I took back the rights of my first two novels, all my novels last year, because I think in our present market, actually it's more exciting for writers to take control of their work and see what happens. Yeah, I mean, it's been wonderful to have publishers publish your work, but doors can be opened by yourself as well. And I've learned a lot about publishing over the years, so and I'm still learning more about it. Anyway, so that was published initially by Metropolitan Inc., which was a American publisher, and so was my second novel, which actually took. It was published in 2014, so it was a big time between them. But in that time between books, I actually did start Falling Pomegranate Seeds with the idea, because Dear Heart, which was my book that's told through the point of view of Sir Thomas Wyatt, it tells the story of Anne Boleyn. It really made me interested in Catherine of Aragon, and I wanted to do a trilogy about her life. And I started that, but I couldn't get it to really work. And then I consoled myself by signing up to do my PhD and to do another novel. So I put my Catherine of Aragon idea away for a long while. And Dear Heart left me with quite a few questions as to what had actually happened that Henry VIII decided to murder the woman that he turned his kingdom upside down to marry. And I do see it as being murder, almost in the sense of domestic violence murder, because he's the husband who decides to get rid of his wife, and he's the king. He's got the power to chop her head off. Nice man. So I really wanted to answer quite a few questions that was left by my first novel. And so I went back and revisited Anne Boleyn's story in this novel. So it starts at the end of 1535 and ends on the day that Anne Boleyn is executed. And it's told through the point of view of Anne Boleyn's niece, Catherine Carey. So that was my PhD artifact, which I had the great joy of having actually I think even a bit longer because they gave me a bit more money. Close to 4 years of being supported by my university to write a novel, and then I was punished after that by having to do the scholarly this part of the
How very
PhD.
convenient.
I know, it was terrible. I actually thought, because I finished the novel in 2 years and then I had to do the scholarly part, and I expected to get that done in 3 months, and it took me 2 years to do. So it was just like, oh my God, when is this beast ever going to be killed?
It's consuming my whole life.
It did. It did.
Everyone
It was
I know who's done a PhD said it took longer than they thought it was going to.
Oh, I really thought I'd have it over and done with in 3 months. I couldn't believe it. I mean, the first, they call it exegesis, which sounds like you're saying exegesis.
It does sound like something biblical, doesn't it?
It does. It felt like something biblical felt like the plague. Well, oh dear, but yeah, I really had this idea of what it was, but it turned out it wasn't that at all. So the first version of my exegesis failed, sort of, as in, my supervisor said, no, that's not what you're supposed to do. Go back and do it again. And then I did the second one, and they said, no, oh, not really. Getting there, but not really. Go back and do it.
And again.
I thought, if I didn't get it right the third time,
that's time to call it a day. Third time lucky.
It was third time lucky. And I actually said to my supervisors after the second version failed, I said, all right, tell me exactly what I'm expected to do. And I'm going to listen, and I'm just going to follow your instructions, which I suppose they had been trying to tell me for months. And then when they told me, I thought, is that it? Is that all I'm supposed to do?
Could they anyway, that in the first place? Hey ho.
No, they wanted me to have the learning experience of discovering.
Got that out of it, haven't you? That's how you got to look at it. You got that out of it. So yeah.
That's right. So anyway, that was finished in 2014, the same year I got my PhD. So that actually got accepted by a publisher before my PhD was with the examiners, when my publisher said, yes, I'd love to publish that too. So had my PhD confirmed at the same time that this book was in the process of being, stepped out in the published world on September the 7th. 2014, because I wanted it to be on the same date as Elizabeth I's birthday. So that worked out really well. And then I was starting. What was I doing? What was I working? Oh, I got really interested in Mary Shelley, and I started researching Mary Shelley's life with the idea of writing a novel about her. And this is the thing about the Tudors, is that they just won't leave me alone. They whenever I think to myself, I'll write about someone different, I just get pulled back to them again. Because when I was writing this novel about Mary Shelley, well, I was doing the research for this novel about Mary Shelley, which I hope one day to pick up again. I contacted Made Global about translating this novel, because Adrian's book had been translated, and I thought, would it be? Yeah. So I spoke. Had this crazy day of exchanging emails with Tim, which is Claire's Ridgway's husband, and obviously he was not interested in translating this book. But then he said to me, have you got any other works that are Tudor or anything else that you think may be of interest to us? And I said, well, look, I had put aside a novel about Catherine of Aragon's early years in Spain, in Castile. And I told him about that, and he said, now that is a book I would be really interested in publishing, because no one else has really explored her early years as a child and before she came to England. And when you hear a publisher say that to you, you know that's something you should take notice of and maybe grab that file. I had to look for that file and think, all right, I've got a lot of work. He actually said on that day, how long do you think it's going to take you to get that book to me? Okay. And I lied. I said 3 months. And then after that, I thought, how am I going to make this lie not a lie? And I went away to a writing retreat for 2 weeks. I did it in 4 months. I got it in 4 months. So I did really well, because because it had the work that the initial work needed to be pulled apart and rewritten in another point of view character. And I knew it would turn into a new story, and I mean, all the research had been done, but it just, the whole story shifts. So, yeah, there was a big doubt in my mind whether I could achieve it. But now anyway,
that was 2016.
Publisher there.
That was 2016, wasn't it?
Yeah. Oh, I got the book to him. Yeah, I think it was probably, it was published in August 2016. So I must have got it to it. Oh, April, because I remember that because
we met and I was pregnant with the spare. I have an heir and a spare, and your little grandson was due about the same time, wasn't he?
Exactly. Yes, that was exciting. Yes. So you were sharing your pregnancy with me, and I was sharing my daughter's pregnancy with you.
Yeah. There's only 13 days between them, I think, isn't there? It's very close together. Very cute.
Yeah, very cute. Very cute. It's been wonderful watching them both grow up too. Yeah. Now that they're 3.
They don't stop.
For 3 years old.
Yeah. They don't stop, do they? Either of them. They're on the go constantly.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah.
Yes. I think this has created a quandary for you, hasn't it? In the sense that one of the questions you then get asked is, so who's your favourite queen, Catherine or Anne?
I'm torn between them. I'm devoted to both of them, which I know that makes that might seem very weird and strange, and probably doesn't make much sense, because they are very different women, but they are both very strong women and very individual. Both of them were very, very intelligent, and I don't, Anne had her terrible moments, but I do think that a lot of the terrible moments can be, you can see that she was under a lot of stress, and I mean, I don't think she actually ever wanted to be queen at the beginning of his interest in her, because she would have just been already witnessing his relationship with her sister Mary, and he treated Mary pretty badly at the end. So Mary was his mistress for 2 years, I think. So why would a sister ever want to be in a relationship with a man that she can see what he's done to her sister? But he really pursued her, and I think eventually she decided that maybe, well, he started to write love letters to her, which maybe weakened her, and weakened that she started to, I reckon at the end she did love him, because women in his life, especially Catherine, never stopped loving him. So, but he was a very spoiled man, I don't like him very much.
I'm not keen myself.
No, no.
He wouldn't be on my Christmas card list. Well,
No, not at all.
just, I mean, I know it's different times and he was under pressure as well, but he was just, oh, I don't know, we could talk about how all his unpleasantness that year, couldn't we, really?
Well, that's right. I mean, he was definitely, yeah, I mean, he had a lot of charm about him, but deep down there was a sense of him being very rotten in the core. He was a rotten apple.
He was, yeah.
Mm.
So you have a sequel, don't you, coming out to Falling Pomegranate Seeds. Now, I know you were looking at the beginning of June this year, but obviously events have taken very bizarre turns.
I know.
This year. There have been different demands on your time than you possibly could have anticipated. So have you changed the date for the release of the next novel?
I was thinking of September, but this year has been so rotten. 2020 has been a terrible year. We had the bushfires at the beginning of the year.
And you were very close to getting evacuated, weren't you, with the bushfires?
Yes, exactly.
At one point.
Oh well, we got a scare one day, and my son came in to me and said, "Don't you think you should be packing stuff?" And I said, "What's going on?" And realised that there was a fire out of control that was only about 15 minutes away from our home. So we decided to pack. I mean, I did emotional packing. I got all our family photos and put them in containers, and realised the next day when we realised that we weren't as endangered as what we thought, how emotionally I just packed all the things that I didn't pack our passports or any legal documents or anything that we should have had in those containers would have been left behind to burn. So spent that day actually doing a less emotional packing, just in case we had to do that again. So I ended up putting our passports and all our legal important documents that we need, like birth certificates and stuff like that, into one of my bags. And so I've just been recently taking those things out and putting them back into their normal places, because it's winter now. Well, not quite winter, but it feels like winter. We're in May and it's been very cold, so I don't think we're going to have any fires for a while. But we've had this virus upon us, haven't we? Yeah, so it's been a rotten year, so I'm thinking about leaving it until 2021 to publish the novel. I'm going to look at Claire's book to find a nice Tudor date.
Yes.
That's a happy event.
Well, that's because you go to Peterborough for the Catherine of Aragon festival, because they sell your books there, and it's an amazing event, but it marks her death. And obviously it was a sad time, and she'd had thanks to Henry, she'd had the later part of her life was really miserable.
It was terrible.
Yeah.
Absolutely terrible. He treated her so dreadfully, considering that really for 20 years he was pretty spoilt as a husband, a wife that would do anything for him, and looked after his needs and whatever. And he was quite bewildered when he realised that she could stand up for herself and put him in his place. And he wasn't used to Catherine when Anne Boleyn, because there was one time when the three of them lived together in one palace, so it was quite really. So he was going for dinner with Catherine and dinner with Anne Boleyn, and having arguments with both women.
Awkward. Serves him right.
So he was quite bewildered by the fact that when he went for one time to dinner with Catherine of Aragon, and she was not really very happy to see him, and quite upset with him and angry at him. And then he went back to Anne Boleyn to complain about Catherine's complaints, and Anne Boleyn said, "What do you expect?" Basically.
Got no sympathy for you at all, really.
torn between two wives.
Yeah,
But
well, it's the least he deserved.
I
He-
know, I know, yeah, yeah.
So that's coming out. So yeah, everything's been turned upside down by the current situation. You know,
Yeah.
things have got
What do
delayed.
you think I should do? 2020 or 2021? I mean, I just don't want to have something. I mean, I don't. I think I want to forget 2020.
Well, they always say that, you know, historically they've been looking back and there's always been some sort of horrendous pandemic or something happened in the 20s in each decade. So I'm thinking, oh, you know, perhaps I should like have a bunker built or something, so that if my kids are still around because of medical science and all this type of thing, then they've got somewhere to go when it gets to 21, 20. They can just hide out for 10 years until it passes. But certainly it's been just rubbish so far. Yeah. So this is the second book. It's going to be a trilogy then. So will
No,
the
no, 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 no. I've decided that the next one's going to be a nice fat book. It's 160,000 at the moment, and probably be a little bit longer than that by the time I'm working on it again because I've got the extra time to do it, and so just revisiting it and polishing it as we do, because until it gets published, you got that opportunity to rework and do things and whatever. So and I don't really actually have that much time at the moment to work on it, because I work on it on Sundays because I'm tutoring, and I've got my grandson 3 days a week, so time is pretty scarce. It's very, very hard to find the time to just sit down with it. So Sunday is usually my time to sit down with it and do some more work on it. It would be ready for September, but I just don't know if I want to, like I say, have it out on a year that's been atrocious. I'll wait for January 2021. Maybe.
I know in recent months book sales have been low, um, just generally,
Yeah,
and obviously people at the minute are quite distracted. So in some ways they're buying more books, but then there's the financial constraints that other people are finding themselves in. It's just a weird, unpredictable time, I think.
exactly. And that's another thing too, is that there has been a lot of books that have been held. I mean, this is people who've been published with big publishers. Their books have been held off until next year because they want to see what's going to happen. We're all navigating in this really quite the unknown, and so because I'm self-publishing, I'm kind of thinking to myself, well, there's things I should do as well, you know, have money to promote it properly, and to wait until January gives me the opportunity to have a little bit more money to do what I need to do, because it's all really reliant on me to make certain that people know about it. And if the bigger publishers are holding their books until next year, then makes sense for me to sort of take note.
Yeah, there's reasons for that, isn't there?
Yeah,
So as
exactly.
someone who's self-published and has had books published, self-publishing is a great thing. And certainly in sort of years gone by, it would be tremendously difficult. Now part of the process is having social media, and places like Amazon makes it much more viable, doesn't it?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I would generally say to people to avoid vanity presses. So those are the ones, the publishers that say, we'll take your book and we'll publish it, and then they will charge you all this money to do it, and then they do a print run, and then you're responsible for selling those books. And it's quite tough, isn't it? So
Once upon a time it was a nightmare. I've heard some really terrible stories of people who've gone the vanity publishing route and ended up with a garage. We call it garage, you know, where you keep, is that what you call it in England? Where you keep your cars.
yeah, a garage, the garage, yeah.
full of boxes of books that they can't get rid of. And I've seen 2 books published by people I know through the vanity press. This is years ago, probably about 7 years ago, and they were so badly done. You couldn't sell those books, you know. I mean, I was sort of hesitant to even buy them, and these friends of mine, I would have wanted to support them, but one I remember I couldn't even open properly. I mean, it was just sad. It really was.
There's a lesson for everybody. If you go to a company that says they're going to publish your book, if they want like a lot of money off of you up front, and then they'll say we'll do a print run and then they're yours, I would not go down that route. I think you would be better off looking at self-publishing. I'm sure there are groups around to support people with self-publishing. Or maybe get an agent as well, maybe approach a few publishers and just see what happens. But yeah, so
I've been actually quite surprised with there are some really wonderful Facebook groups for people who are self-publishing, who are, this is other authors who've gone this way, who are so supportive. I've been, when I made the decision, I had all these people guiding me, mentoring me, giving me advice. Really, what I would recommend for anybody is that you still need to have your work professionally edited. You also need to make certain that you've got a good cover, and also to have beta readers, which are people who are willing to read your work and tell you whether or not the work is ready to step out there. I've been very fortunate. I've had 6 other writers who've been willing to read all manner of things and give me lovely feedback, and also write reviews for me already. So that's been absolutely brilliant. So you've got to if you're going to go down the route of self-publishing, you've got to really take this as a professional writer and understand you need to spend a bit of money, as pay for that professional editor. I've been lucky with my covers. These covers are historical, so they are, well, this one actually I ended up paying the money to the art gallery to use because I loved it so much. But if you can find an image on Wikipedia Media Commons, it means it's now in the public domain.
Okay, so that's a good
so you can use that. So usually it's 75 years plus 75 years of the author's life. There's a bit of a formula. Different countries have different rules, but generally if you find it on Wikipedia Commons, then it is in the public domain, so you can use that image. So with historical novels, we are fortunate because there are so many paintings that are now, like this one here, which is supposed to be Catherine of Aragon as a young woman. The next book is going to be using the twin painting to this by the same artist. Again, Catherine of Aragon as a young woman. So that tells readers straight away that this is a historical work. You've got a picture of a historical woman. And of course, if people wanted to investigate that painting, they'd realise that that's supposed to be Catherine of Aragon. And yeah, so wasn't she lovely?
She was.
Wasn't she lovely, the young woman? And when you look at that painting and compare it to the one that's been disputed, as they say, well, maybe it's actually Mary Tudor, the sister of Henry VIII, not Catherine of Aragon. That painting that's been disputed is very similar to this one. So I think my belief is that painting that has been believed to be, the one I'm talking about.
I think so. Yeah, it's.
I can get it off my library, but
quite a well-known one, isn't it?
Yeah. I can.
And she's
find it.
Facing the other way to that one, isn't she?
It's almost similar pose. It's a very similar pose. I think I can see if I can find it.
The eyes a little bit dipped.
Better not, because I might end up toppling my computer off here.
Well, what we'll do is when I put the video up, if you want to, you could put an image or anything else underneath it.
I will put that image, because that image is interesting in the fact that it has been disputed whether or not it is Catherine of Aragon, because it is very similar to this. Like I said, it's also has the scallop shells around the edge of her gown, which is, for someone who's actually been to San Diego in Spain, you know, visited the Cathedral of St. James. Mary Tudor never visited the Cathedral of St. James in Spain, so why would she have scallop shells around her gown? Oh, anyway.
They had a good relationship, didn't they? Mary Tudor, the French Queen, and Catherine of Aragon.
They did. There was 10 years difference between them. When Catherine came to England, she wasn't quite 16, so she actually turned 16 just after her marriage to Arthur. I think the thing is that with Mary is that, of course, Mary lost her mother in 1503, so she would have been 7, and they've got a proxy mother, sort of, you know, someone to console her, and which is one of the things I've done in all manner of things, is I've shown that they had a close relationship when she lost her mother, and so you can see that you know, the relationships with Henry and with Mary began really early for Catherine of Aragon, that she knew them from childhood.
Yes, yeah.
Both, because Henry was only 11 when she arrived in England, and
it was apparently a bit enamoured with her even then, apparently.
I think so. I believe so. I mean, there she was, a princess, and she did come. Her mother sent her with so many jewels, and she was very well endowed. I mean, I think there was something like she had 50 shifts that she brought. And some of them were silk, as in so, you know, she was definitely not sent across as a poor princess. And when you read about the what she wore for her wedding, she had this white dress which had hoops around, and also from what I gather, is the veil had jewels throughout it, and so you can imagine an 11-year-old boy would have been just absolutely in awe of this girl, who she was very pretty, a very pretty girl, and had the most glorious hair. So she had this, as you can see, beautiful red hair, sort of almost like your colour, Catherine.
Well, that's not rude.
But, you know, she had red gold hair.
Yeah.
And there we go, red gold hair that went down past her waist to her hips. And when she married, she would have been showing her hair because she was a virgin, and when she became queen, she was allowed to show her hair, because queens were the ones who were allowed to have their hair flow free. Yeah, so, you know, I think he did have a crush on her from his early years. And he always wanted things that other people had. So there, his older brother had this girl. So, yeah, all right, I'll want her too. He always wanted other people's toys.
Yes. Yeah. Oh. So after I saw you last year, you went to the Alhambra, didn't you? You went and saw Claire and Tim. So obviously that might have been quite an emotional experience for you to go to there and imagine Catherine's time there.
Yeah, it's actually the second time I've been there, and the first time I had the same experience, in the sense that you can feel her spirit there. Spain is so, I mean, really have to understand that she was a Spanish princess. She came from a different culture, a different climate. When I was there in Spain last year, it was the most beautiful day, not a cloud in the sky. It was very, 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 very warm. And, you know, yeah, that is such a dreamlike place. You can just imagine her being there in the gardens, and the gardens were as, you know, beautiful then as what they, well, I don't know. I mean, they were beautiful gardens back then as well. And of course, the palace was not as old as what it is now, and you can see how beautiful it is. The Alhambra is just amazing, you know. So you can see that she came from such a rich environment, and the contrast between where she came from to England. England was very backward when she arrived. In where she was growing up, there was baths in the palaces, and because they were very influenced by the Moorish culture, and England in the reign of Henry VII lacked for a lot. There's a story about her being really shocked to witness the English nobility's practice of weeing wherever. So, you know, there was places in these beautiful palaces that, I mean, England also had beautiful palaces, but their idea of behaviour was lacking for a lot. And it seems that if a male wanted to, he could just whip it out and just wee wherever, which is terrible. And so, you know, she actually saw that and was very shocked. And later on in her, when she was queen, they actually developed rules of what to do, like not wipe your pooey hands on expensive drapery. I mean, those sort of things.
No.
Was, you know, I don't know if that was, they had X on walls, which is not X mark the spot to do the wee, but X don't do the wee, because, you know, you don't wee on a cross.
Yeah. Just, yeah, actually I was saying to Natalia when we were talking last week, when Anne Boleyn came back, she must have felt very disappointed comparing, you know, the two courts. England must have seemed very dark and dingy and frankly a bit less cultured and disappointing. So,
Yeah, although by that stage, or Henry VIII, if we've got to acknowledge the fact that he spent a lot of money beautifying his palaces, and he did a lot of spending on building and construction, and of course he grabbed Hampton Court, or there was what was it called, Hampton Court, when Cardinal Wolsey owned it. I think it's I can't remember what it was called when Cardinal Wolsey owned the Hampton Court, but he was a Renaissance king.
yeah.
He was a Renaissance king, and he did. I mean, I think if you, a lot of this can be laid at the lap of Catherine of Aragon. I think she was very much the one to encourage all the better traits in Henry VIII, including making your palaces as beautiful as possible. You know, they had carpets, and they spent a lot of money on gold and whatever. And yes, some of his building wasn't very good because he wanted everything built very quickly. So a lot of the buildings that was happening during his reign have now tumbled into history. We can't find them anymore because they didn't last very long. He wanted them up as quickly as possible, but when they were there, they looked pretty good. Yeah. So yeah, and I think we can say yes, Catherine of Aragon, because she had the experience of growing up in a beautiful palaces and with a lot of gorgeous architecture and colour and flowers and whatever. She was very much into encouraging, she was very interested in gardening, and she was the one supposedly who introduced apricot trees to England, and some other trees too, because there was a time when gardens had been destroyed because of the Civil War, the War of Roses. A lot of things were burnt down and everything like that. So there was a lot of rebuilding happening during these years. So we're talking about from 1509 onwards. Yeah. So yeah, England became a much better place under the stewardship of the guiding hands of Catherine of Aragon and Henry VIII.
I read somebody, it might have been Tony Mount, and I apologise to Tony if it wasn't her, did a poll recently-ish about where did people think, we look at it as the Tudor era.
Era.
In the end. Obviously before that, the medieval period. Mm. And you kind of divide these two, which you're saying, well, I hope it was Tony. No, I said that. Where does it start and end? Is it really as clear cut as Bosworth, medieval, Tudor period? Can you, or do you think it was somewhere different? And to me, and this is just my opinion, it feels almost like, because of what you were just saying, the medieval period kind of really carried on through the reign of Henry Tudor. It didn't.
Yes,
it didn't really feel like it changed until Henry became king, and he was a lot more flamboyant and appeared more amiable and wanted to go out and build and do all these things, and go to war with France, because that's just what you did back then. And it was almost compulsory, wasn't it, to go to war with France? And to me, that sort of almost, it was the Tudor era because there was a Tudor king in Henry VII, but it really feels to me like there was that shift at that point.
Yeah. Henry VII was definitely more Middle Ages still, What makes sense, doesn't it? That Henry VIII, he wasn't even quite 18 when he became king. And when he became king, he actually inherited a lot of money from the fact that his father had done a good job with filling up the coffers. So he was a wealthy king, and he had the money to spend. And there's, of course, all this wonderful Renaissance happening in Italy that was coming across. So he's a young man. He wants to be up to date and doing all this. He doesn't want to stick with the old way. He wants to start a new way. And he was responsible for he's regarded as being the father of the modern navy, because he's reign saw quite a few ships being built during his reign, which I suppose when you think about it, that was good, because the ships were there eventually for the Armada. I think they were still being used. So I'd like to know how much money was left at the end of the reign. I can't remember now. But yeah,
they were certainly seemed to be very different monarchs, didn't they?
Oh, they were. Yeah. Major contrasts between them. It's quite interesting when you reflect about, because Henry VII actually kept his son almost in his own bedchamber, and it was almost like he was keeping an eye on this young man and making certain that, like, he didn't trust him. So it makes me, it creates a lot of questions in my mind as to whether or not in my theory is that because he did look very much like his grandfather, Edward IV. And Edward IV took England on a path to, more civil war, and left the country in a bad state, and Richard III became king, and then, the whole thing was a mess. So I think, I reckon that my theory is that they recognised that Henry VIII, before he was Henry VIII, was very much like his grandfather. A lot of charm and physical beauty, but yeah, with tendencies for indulgence and being a spoiled brat. Mm.
It was almost like, I don't, they say, don't they, that with leadership, whether it's presidents or prime ministers or kingship, that quite often, I suppose it's a bit different when people are elected, but you often have somebody who's quite flamboyant, and then the next person is someone who's a little bit more staid and sensible. But then obviously with Edward, you know, Henry's son, you didn't really get that. He was king, but he kind of wasn't. It wasn't, there was not a huge amount there, I suppose, that would tell us what sort of king he would have become had he been able to rule himself. And then poor old Mary, you know, she was queen for 5 years, and I think she was just, she'd had a really terrible time, and I think she just wanted to be loved and accepted.
I agree.
And then obviously she had an awful lot of health problems, and I was actually, sort of digress slightly here, I was reading something about her the other day, and someone was saying about, sympathetically, about her health problems, and they think
a lot of women's problems. Yeah, a lot of women's problems.
And oh no, actually, do you know what it was? Randomly, I was listening to The Mirror and the Light by Hilary Mantel, and I'm not very far into it, but he just sent, I think, Rafe Sadler, I think, to go and see her to get her to take the oath. And he was saying, well, she didn't look well, and they're reporting that she has a lot of health problems. And it occurred to me that maybe she had like endometriosis or something like that.
Yeah, you're probably right there. But also, she was under so much stress for so many years of her life, through the fact that her father did what he did to her mother, who she did love. And then after, I mean, she always believed, while her mother was alive, she blamed Anne Boleyn for her father's behaviour.
As you would.
Anne Boleyn got executed, and then she discovered that the situation had not improved. In fact, it got worse. And she had, was it Howard who was threatening, if you were my daughter, I would beat you until your head was like an orange, you know, basically.
Another
you know.
charmer, was he?
Oh, so you know, the poor girl. I mean, she's so young. I mean, she's a 17-year-old who was completely chucked into deep waters beyond her. You know, no one could. I wouldn't be able to. Poor girl. I just feel so sad for her, and especially that moment when she realised that it's actually her father who really wants her to finally say, yes, I am illegitimate. My mother was never, ever your wife. It was a incestuous relationship. Oh, yeah, she was forced to, to admit that she was a bastard. Yeah, which she saw as a betrayal of her mother too. Which, you know, you can just imagine if you love your mother and your mother's dead, and then you get forced into a situation where you feel that you betray her. I think so much of her health problems were also to do with stress that she had from those early years.
And then
she had bad teeth as well. Poor woman, bad teeth.
And then, of course, we had Philip of Spain, who I think she loved desperately. I think she just wanted.
Oh, poor woman. Oh, yes, she was desperate to marry him. I mean, it would have been, she was the one child of Henry VIII who should have been married early. And, you know, as a 20-year-old young woman, had a family, because she had a lot of maternal instincts. I mean, she gave those maternal instincts to mothering Edward and Elizabeth, and also Jane Grey, and other young people as well. So if she had been allowed to be married, and of course Henry VIII couldn't let her get married because, well, first of all, he wouldn't want her to get married to a noble, because that was sort of kind of beneath. His daughter shouldn't get married to just a lord or earl or duke, because she should be getting married to a prince. But if he allowed her to get married to a prince or a king, then it put her in a situation where her husband would say, well, she had the right to be queen. And yeah, so he had to keep her unmarried because both situations created difficulties, and especially if she got married to a European royal who would see that she had, if he decided that she had the right to the throne, then it threatened any other children that Henry VIII may have had. So poor, I feel so sad for her because she was frustrated. Yeah, and she became queen. One of the first things she did was investigate who she could get married to, and decided on Philip, of all people, who was 11 years younger than her. And
God's choice.
not that I'm thinking about
Hindsight and living in a different world is a wonderful thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, he didn't have a good. He didn't. I mean, he was a womanizer in a sense. He had a mistress, which he left behind to, so he had bastard children. He had been married to someone that was almost close enough to being his sister because she was cousin twice over. And so she ended up having his son Juan, I think it was Don Juan, who was turned out to be imbecile because of the fact that his parents were so closely, and of course the Philip's first wife died in childbirth, which bred him to. I don't think he got married before. I mean, I think that was because he got married quickly to another, the French princess Elizabeth after Mary, and then he got married to one more closely related cousin. I think it might have been his half niece. Oh dear.
Dispensations all round.
These things happen. These things happen in this.
Fortunately, not so much now, but it makes me think of all the Habsburg jaw and everything like that with all the, yeah.
Oh my goodness, yes, my goodness. That's for sure. And that got worse and worse. Oh, because of the interbreeding. Yeah.
Shocking. Oh God.
Yeah.
Okay, so we mentioned briefly when we were talking about your second novel, Catherine Carey. So it's interesting that it's told through her eyes, because there hasn't been a massive amount about Catherine Carey, has there? So there's Adrian's novel, isn't there, Corotto, and is it Sarah Beth Watkins, or is it somebody else who wrote a book about Catherine Carey as well?
There's another novel, is there?
Yeah, no, I can't remember. I'll have to have a look. My brain's just entirely deserted me. Now,
all right.
You had, I hope I've got that right full stop now. I'm sure there's somebody else. And if there isn't, I've just made a right twit of myself.
No, that's okay. I mean, I've got to explore that now because I thought there was only two. I only thought there was two of Catherine Carey. Yeah.
So I'll have to, Adrienne will probably know herself. So, but Corotto is definitely, obviously, worth reading.
Yeah.
I got really pulled in.
Oh, it's a lovely book.
Just
lovely book.
Felt, so much for, I don't do a spoiler alert here, but no, I won't. But there's a couple of bits particularly that were like, properly fetch the Kleenex. But yeah, beautiful novel. And, you have her, obviously this is through her eyes, and you talked about this. Tell us about why you chose to put Catherine in there, and there's a dispute about her age at that time, isn't there?
There is.
When people started looking at that at the time of Anne Boleyn's execution. So that's really interesting to hear about these different theories and why people think she was one age. And do you think she was Henry's daughter?
Oh, I do. I really do. And there's a question mark about her brother as well, which is even more curious because he was actually described during the time of the reign of Elizabeth I as being the bastard son of Henry VIII. But definitely there's more evidence that perhaps Catherine Carey is. I mean, I'm going by my own research and the fact that Elizabeth I had a very, 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 very close relationship, more closer with she loved Catherine through her life and kept her very close as a queen. Catherine Carey ended up being her, the woman who was, what was the chief bed? She looked after the bedroom of the Queen. I've forgotten the actual title, but it's a very high role. You can't get any closer to the Queen, or one of the closest roles. One of the closest roles that you could be to with being with the Queen. Elizabeth really did love her, and vice versa, even though sometimes Elizabeth treated her pretty terribly, including the fact that when she was ill, I believe Catherine wanted to go home, and Elizabeth wouldn't think about it. She wanted her to stay there, even though, her cousin / sister was clearly dying. But I think she wanted to stay there so that, she could perhaps make her live through her you can't die on me, basically. But she did. And she died on.
Sorry, carry on.
Died on the anniversary of Elizabeth's coronation as well.
All these strange coincidences. I mean, Elizabeth, I know people are obviously very, I don't know how careful they were when they spoke of her mother around her, but she must have heard or thought about or known that Catherine could be her sibling. It's impossible to think, I'm sure, that she wouldn't have known that. And then there was like a bit of a physical resemblance, which I suppose you could have argued was maternal one, I guess, but the hair.
I know. They are cousins, so you could blame it on that, but it is so they look more like sisters than cousins. Very, very similar. Very, very similar.
So tell us about the dispute about the age, which kind of first comes to light because people are wondering whether or not Catherine may have been present at the execution of Anne Boleyn.
Yes. Well, this is the thing, is that obviously I've been researching the Tudors for many, many years now. Years ago, I discovered the story, the legend that Catherine Carey was there on the scaffold. And when I first came across that story, the year of her birth date made her as 12 years old. And I thought, no, this makes her too young to be on the scaffold, because that's a very, very responsible role. You have to hold it together, and you're actually got the job to pick up the pieces of, once someone's been decapitated, pick up the head and the body, and so you've got to hold it together. So 12 years old, I thought, was too young to be expecting someone to. You don't know what someone can. 12 was a child in my mind, even though in Tudor times, being 12 as a female, you could get married, but that was not really that rarely happened. So anyway, I thought, no, I don't believe that. But later on, I came across another academic document, which an essay, which actually created doubt about Catherine Carey's birth date, which sort of suggested that she was 14 in 1536. And I thought to myself, well, if she was 14 in 1536, that does make her old enough. That's 2 years older, and you know what a person is like more by 14 than 12, more maturity. And I thought, that would be a really interesting point of view character to carry a story of Anne Boleyn. And I was really interested in the mother-daughter story part of it too, because because Mary Boleyn and Anne Boleyn are so different as sisters, and their choices where they ended up at the end of their lives are so different, you know, and became queen and politician. But in a sense, Mary Boleyn ended up marrying for love, and to the great, you know, her family kind of disowned her because she chose to marry beneath her, and ended up living away from her family in the last years of her sister's life. So yeah, so I kind of thought that there's a story there in a teenage daughter forced to staying with her mother, who is staying away from court, where everything happens, where life is more interesting, and you've got an aunt who's the queen, and I thought, yeah, a teenage girl probably want to be with where all the colour and all the life, and where the with her aunt who's the queen, because this is where life is going to happen for her. But yeah, so I thought that would make a really interesting story.
It is, and because Catherine was of what we know of her, was such a different personality. He wasn't
Very intelligent, yeah, very strong,
very sweet maternal nature, and she had about 6,000 kids, didn't she, roughly?
Yeah.
Lots. So I was just like, when I found out how many children she had, I was just absolutely taken aback. Like, oh my goodness. So we see so many of her descendants now, don't we?
Oh yeah.
Because it's interesting, after everything that Henry did, it was he sent Margaret away, his elder sister, so it was the Scottish line and his sister-in-law's line that we still see now after everything he did. There's, you know, so it's a strange one. I think I have apologies to make, because I think Adrian's other novel, The Raven's Widow, about Jane Rochford, I think it might be Jane Rochford someone else has written about. I think I might have got myself confused there. So I will find out. I'm really sorry, everyone. I will find out and make a note of that. So, oh dear, too many Tudory things, too many exciting books.
Still only books about Catherine Carey, but then of course I'm talking about the book was published in both our books were published in 2014. Yeah. So who knows? There might have been another one out and I didn't notice. And I feel awful if that's the case.
If I was one of these immensely clever people, I'd edit that out so I'd look less stupid. But that isn't a skill I've currently acquired, so everyone else will get to see that. So sorry, everyone.
That's okay. I think it just shows that we don't know everything, do we?
Oh, there's so many wonderful books there. There's not enough time to read them all.
Oh yes, that's for sure. Yeah.
So yeah. What are you reading at the moment?
Oh, at the moment, I've just finished actually a book that's written by Susanna, historian. I've forgotten her surname.
Susanna Lipscomb.
Yes. So it's about French peasant women in the late 16th century. It's fascinating, actually. And she makes it so. I mean, it's obviously non-fiction, and she's using the information of at the time the church, the religion of that village used to take down complaints of villagers about what was going on. So there was a lot of gossip and adultery and husbands beating their wives and whatever. And some of the stories are just laugh aloud funny because you just can just hear their voices in these pages. So I've got to write a glowing review of it because I've really enjoyed it, and I was thinking that it's really worth exploring as to I'm wondering if I can actually turn it into a bit of a play, because I can see some of the characters talk. I mean, they are so alive, these women, that I would like to explore deciding on, say, 5 of them to actually be bring them alive on a stage. And yeah, really fascinating. Really, really fascinating stories.
It's just
So these are not noble women; they were peasant women. But yeah,
it's just endless where you could take all these things, isn't it? You
oh yeah,
start thinking, oh yeah, I read about the Tudors, but actually what we tend to look at is quite an isolated bubble. And I go back, I really like the Wars of the Roses as well. I probably do that sort of just as much, really. Even then,
yeah,
branches off here, there, and everywhere. Nothing exists in isolation, does it? It's all, but
yeah,
you, in terms of books and drama, theatre, television, all those types of things, it gravitates towards, as a general rule, the more well-known figures. I think it's only more recently that people have looked at people like Catherine Carey and Jane Rochford and sort of moved a little bit sideways into looking at these.
yeah.
We still had quite a lot of influence, actually, but maybe appear in books, but they're not a main focus, or they are for quite a short time. So it's quite interesting and it's a good thing that all these things are being explored, because there's so many myths about people and what they've said and what they've done and what type of person they are.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's good to, and I know not everybody agrees, but it's important to have all those different viewpoints, because everyone's research is slightly different and everyone's viewpoint is slightly different, and so you don't necessarily have to agree with something that an author has written, whether it's fiction or non-fiction, but it makes you think, at least,
I
and
think
and carry on sort of developing, and it opens up debate. Whereas I think historically, in sort of decades, even fairly recently, it's just been Henry VIII had 6 wives and this happened, and Richard III, and then Henry Tudor gets a little bit lost because he was a bit boring to some people, not to me but to some people, and then Edward wasn't around for very long, and Mary wasn't around for very long, and Elizabeth, so it's kind of all these sort of pockets of information. But Elizabeth learned a lot from what her brother and sister had done.
for sure. And I think when you look at if we go back to Catherine of Aragon, what she laid down for her daughter Mary, because Catherine was a very, very intelligent woman, and she actually obviously really wanted her daughter to be queen, and she was, I don't know if have you read this book?
Which one is it?
It's the education of a Christian woman.
Oh
So
no,
yeah,
sorry.
Catherine of Aragon organised for one of her countrymen to come to England to write, basically plan out the education of Mary.
Yeah.
And so because Catherine put in place the education for females for her own daughter, that benefited other women at the court. And so you can argue that by what Catherine of Aragon did, it prepared the ground for Elizabeth I to be educated thoroughly, because Mary was brought up to being a queen for quite a long time. From the time she was, when they realised that there was no other baby coming along, Catherine of Aragon had her last child. I think she was 32, and that was another stillborn child, a little girl. After that, she seems to have gone into early menopause, which in a sense I regard as a blessing for her, because by that stage she had six pregnancies at least, had lost 5 babies. I mean,
Unimaginable.
that's terrible, absolutely terrible. I'd love to investigate as to why. I mean, she carried the babies to full term. Her first baby, which was a girl, was born, well, the first one, I said to full term, that's not true. First baby was born prematurely. That was a girl, and it was born dead. But the next baby was her boy that lived for 50 days or so. And it appears that he died cot deaf. Who knows what happened there. But most of her pregnancies were full term, and the babies either died at birth or died just after a day or so. Yeah. So, just why?
Yeah.
What could cause that?
It's
Yeah,
just
I just would like to
horrible.
know what could be. I mean, I often thought I might write to a doctor, obstetrician, and say, what could cause this? What could cause a woman to be carry a child to term, and for the child to die at birth or die after?
Yeah.
What? Yeah, it's very interesting. Mm.
Her life was so successful up to a point apart from that. And then in the end, she was just treated appallingly on top of all that other grief that she carried. Like
Mm.
you say, she was an
Mm.
immensely strong woman, but she shouldn't have had to have been.
Yeah. Well, she was a woman of faith, and in a sense, that's a blessing that she had that strong belief in God, because it became, the more suffering that she had. I mean, she was in a. I won't say she was saint-like, but she definitely took on the lessons of sorrow, and was able to deal with it far better than I could ever imagine me dealing with anything like that. I would be in pieces. But the years of her life just deepened her faith.
Yeah.
And you got the final letter that she wrote to her daughter Mary, which is talking about, if you basically suggesting that if you are forced into a situation of being suffering, then God is preparing you to be a better human being and preparing you for heaven, basically. So, they did have, their beliefs structure. You can admire their belief structure, because they did see God as being very much part of their world and their lives and their hearts and their souls, and that all their lives was moving to be with God.
Mm.
So I suppose that was one good thing about that period of time. Is that you do see these wonderful people of faith coming out of that, and good examples. Mm, yeah, even Anne Boleyn at the end.
Yeah. Wow. Oh God. It was such a turbulent time. So much change in a comparatively small amount of time. And so it's
Mm,
not really a surprise that things were so unsettled for quite, that it's seen that, Bosworth and I know there was like Battle of Stokefield and everything, that brought an end to all that conflict, but it was just a different type of conflict, wasn't it, really? It was,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, that's the battle between the two religions rather than necessarily on the battlefield, and many people suffered, and there was a lot of unhappiness as a result. It's a very
There's a
strange
lot
time.
going on with Henry VII and Henry VIII, getting rid of all the ones that were close in blood to the throne. They did a very good job of getting rid of most of the ones that were any
Even up
you know
polls so many years
yeah,
later.
terrible.
Yeah.
Absolutely terrible.
Oh,
Yeah,
boy, what a
yeah.
joy man was. Right, thank you so much. I think we better wind it up, because otherwise we'll be here all day.
Oh, we're talking about the Tudors forever, hey?
No, exactly. This is the problem, isn't it? It could just be a kind of perpetual, like, going on and on and on forever. So, but I'm sure, if you would, we could come back another time.
I'd love to.
We can talk some more Tudors. And by then as well, you might be working on Mary Shelley by then as well. Yeah, I would be very
I
interested to
think
read
the
about Mary
Tudors will
Shelley.
keep me up. I've actually started another work which I've been thinking about for a long time, and it's set in 2010 in Australia, but it has a Tudor story as well.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'd like to play
Intriguing.
around. I like to play
Intriguing.
around with two different stories in one novel. So anyway, we'll see what happens with that.
Okay, well, you can keep me posted on that one then, because that sounds
Oh,
quite
it's going to be,
interesting.
it's Catherine, the way I write, I think it's going to probably take, no, I'm kind of hoping I'll get some more time to start doing more work on that, but I have been working on that earlier this year before this whole thing happened. And then, so I'd like to get the draft of that done by the end of the year, and I'll tell you more about it by then.
Okay, I shall hold you to that. But I know you will.
Hold me to anything, darling.
I see.
You can hold me to it. Been lovely talking to you.
Yes,
Lovely.
and maybe, hopefully, it won't be too long before you can come over again. I know it's just difficult. Now, you're hoping to come next year, weren't you? But everything's.
I was planning to come over in 2022. I was really looking forward to that. But anyway, it's the way it goes. We'll see what happens. I think as long as everyone stays safe and well, that's the main goal at the moment. And everyone look after yourselves. Yeah.
You take
and read books. And read books.
Read lots and lots of books, particularly books about Catherine of Aragon.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, and other characters.
Yes,
other characters.
And Anne Boleyn, yes. All right. Thank you so
All
much.
Right,
Take
all
care.
right.
Bye.
We'll see you. I love. Bye.